Well, here we go. We're back to Now and Next. Welcome in. I'm Dave Trafford for Story Studio Network. And we took a bit of a break from all the podcasts over the last couple of weeks, March break and all. The girls were here from Nova Scotia, had a good visit with the granddaughters, and they had good visit with the cousins. So that kept us busy. They had my undivided attention. It's hard not to give them their undivided attention when they're all in the room at the same time. And of course, we're just coming off the outcome of the provincial election, and that was the daily effort as far as On the Ledge was concerned. So thanks to all of you who kind of dipped in and hung in and did your bit and either contributed to the show or listened to the show. I know you've got new folks who've come to the show, so that was great, and hope you hang around. So here we are. We're back into the groove with Now and Next, and this happens to be our cast week, our comms and strategy team. Anne-Marie Aikins is here from Curious Public. Lindsay Broadhead is also in the house, and Bob Reid, and away we go. So we want to look at a few things, but just a quick around the table. I just have you all in the room right now in terms of we're a week and a half, 2 weeks out almost from the election result, Bob. We're going to get a cabinet announcement today as we speak, the cabinet being sworn in at Queen's Park. Just your top line thoughts.
Textbook. Just the whole way it went for Doug Ford, I don't think could have been, well, it could have been better if he picked up a couple more seats, I guess, which they were hoping to do. But in terms of the timing of framing the ballot question, of the arc and shape and storylines of the campaign, it couldn't have gone better. It was everything that they were looking for, and the focus, the focus on the right things was 99.5% where it should be. I could have lived without hearing about the 401 tunnel again, because I think that's just cockamamie. But all of the big pieces landed exactly where they needed to for Ford and company.
Lindsay, what do you think?
Textbook, but also there was a different chapter in it. Ford's role as Canada's champion, he leaned into that perfectly. You can argue on either side whether it was appropriate or right or ethical from a equal opportunity for other candidates perspective, but parking all of that, because frankly now it's irrelevant. He leaned into it beautifully and seized the moment. Sees that rare political moment that he was faced with, and we've seen that pay dividends so far anyway, even since the election. I was really struck by I was at that night when the results were coming in. I was at the Toronto Region Board of Trade's annual dinner, and what was so striking was how irrelevant the election was. Didn't come up in conversation. After the event, there was a results TV, where people normally would stand in front of. This crowd is very politically oriented. No one was there. The results were rolling in, and it was a non-event. I found that striking, and certainly highly relevant. They played their cards perfectly, knowing that he was the de facto winner. And my third observation was, despite the NDP's surprising results in many ways, getting more seats, I don't think there was a valid counter voice in the election. So despite the efforts, and frankly, despite how little Ford said that was net new, there was very little that was appealing or intriguing or resonated with the public from the other parties.
Just to pick up on that quickly, Lindsay is saying that it was a non-event at the event that you were at. One thing I noticed anecdotally was I saw maybe a handful of lawn signs in my area, and I wanted to see if that was the same with you guys.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder
live in
whether
an
the
area
weather
that's
was an issue, just trying to drive the stake into a frozen ground, and it was 2 feet of snow, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that was part of it. But you're right. The only place I really saw signage, Bob, was sort of along the boulevards or whatever, where it's easy for the teams to go in and do it.
Yeah.
Didn't have anybody knocking on the door necessarily, or it didn't seem to be as much of a function.
I live in a riding, so Beaches, East York. So the PCs weren't part of the play. It's NDP versus Liberal. So there was, a battle. So there was a little bit more interest there. But don't diminish, Dave, what you just said about hammering in the lawn signs. Like people, you heard this anecdotally within the community. They struggle to find a way to participate in the more traditional ways that they normally would.
Yeah.
Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I live in a condo building, and every election we have to compete with because it's a, captured audience that you can just come in the building, especially in the dead of winter, could have just come from floor to floor to floor, and they stick it. Nope, none of that this time around. So you didn't see them out there. However, to their, it was because the Conservatives read the room. And the only issue right now that is concerning voters, any voters, whatever level you're talking about, is the tariffs and the threat to the economy and how it's going to impact their towns, their cities, their downtowns, them. And I think Ford captured all the attention for that. So it was very difficult for anybody else to have a voice. What did they say when they're just a candidate? But the one thing I did notice, I was very happy that the result was as it is for the opposition, that we do have a strong-ish type oppositional voice, which is good for democracy. It's too bad for Bonnie Crombie, but the Liberals did do well, capturing 30% of the vote. So that was different as well. But I agree with Lindsay above that it wasn't capturing a lot of people's attention. I was paying attention. Many of the people I know were paying close attention, but generally people are focused on the tariffs, and they still are, and they are going to be for the time being. I think Ford will have some new challenges that his team is going to have to pivot quickly. I think there'll be more attention. For example, he took the booze off the shelves. He might have put it back on, and then they took them off again. Then he canceled the Starling contract. Then he uncanceled it and then canceled it again. Those are some missteps I would suggest. But I think there are more U.S. contracts that are going to draw some attention to say, what about those contracts? And I think his team better be prepared for it. One example is Ontario Place. They have big U.S. conglomerates or European conglomerates that are building Ontario Place and getting billions of dollars out of it. Why isn't he canceling those?
Yeah, well, and that brings us nicely to what's gone on at City Hall here in Toronto this past week or so. And there were already hints of it when Ford talked about canceling some of these contracts. Lindsay, I thought the mayor, for as much and all as we've given her a rough ride over the last month or so on a number of issues, I thought the response from the mayor's office on this particular issue, vis-a-vis procurement, American contractors, et cetera, was bang on, and in fact probably more consistent than we got from
they
Queen's
can
Park.
no longer bid on any City of Toronto contracts, and that's about $1 billion over 10 years. And the City of Toronto is the fourth largest city in North America. Our $79 billion budget is the size of Florida. And we hope to get their attention to say, hey, we used to be friends. We're good neighbors. We are economically very successful because we cooperate with each other through trade. And with this trade war, which is totally senseless and harmful, we have to fight back.
$1 billion over 10 years, relatively speaking, is, symbolic, a gesture, Lindsay. But I think the point being, okay, we're going to stand up behind, what we're standing for, elbows up attitude in Toronto.
That's right. Elbows up across the board, and it was the right play. I'm going to start with a caveat, and then I'll go to compliment. My caveat in all of this, and I have used this caveat previously more towards what premiers have been doing, but now mayors or other levels of government or spokespeople are coming into play as well. My primary focus and concern always is that it's a Canada first approach. So whatever's happening by our prime minister of the day, it needs to be coordinated. There can't be any independent actions. So my caveat in this is I hope that Mayor Chow, her team, had coordinated with the federal government prior to going on CNN. I have real reservations for any communications that stand outside of that primary. There should be one voice model. If everyone's in sync, amazing. That's great. So assuming that is the case, what stuck with me is that Americans do not know or understand how big Toronto is. There's just no way. Those data points around the fourth largest city in North America should be, and even though it's not a Fox audience, it's a CNN audience, it should be a slap in the face to wake up and say that, when you add all of these towns together, whether it's from Canada, whether you add in the European cities as well, it's going to add up. And I'm just so proud that every person is leaning in and doing the individual elbows up thing, because it matters when you add it all together.
Yeah, Bob, it was interesting when she threw the number out, $79 billion budget, she had to have it clarified because the media in this town only focuses on the operating budget. I mean, when you put everything in capital operating, it's a huge amount of cash. Again, back to the idea that, it's $1 billion over 10 years might be a gesture, but at the same time, there's already people saying that's great because there are people here in Canada who can provide those services, or in Toronto who can provide those services. So it's going to actually mean jobs. We're not going to miss anything. So why don't we do it?
Yeah, it's an eyebrow raiser of a stat, and I liked her other comparators as well. To Lindsay's point, they really don't have any sense of the size and scale of this city and all that it does, and all the all the dollars that are at play. So I thought it was a good bit of business by the mayor to be front and center with that, and I do think she is in sync with the other levels. I mean, it's a very simple, common refrain. We're not going to do business with you if you're going to continue to threaten our sovereignty, and if you're going to continue to unnecessarily and unprovokedly punish us economically.
Yeah, and Marie, if she hadn't done that, if she hadn't stepped up and said what she said, made the move, and so deliberately, it would have been immediately tone deaf, because all we're hearing from the average unwashed among us is that I'm not traveling to the United States for vacations in the short term or in the near future, or I'm really am paying attention to, is there a maple leaf on that product on the shelf?
Yeah, it's you're right. People aren't traveling to the States, and the tourism numbers that are coming out from the cross-border trips, whether by car or by flying, are incredible. So Canadians really are stepping up and putting their money where their mouth is and canceling their trips. They canceled over March break. That's pretty incredible. And I think people are capitalizing. I think it was a brilliant move going on CNN for Olivia. Again, if it, as Lindsay said, coordinated with the feds, and it does sound like it was. I was a bit critical while I was watching her because her approach, a couple of times she giggled and inappropriately, like she was just uncomfortable, and so it sounded like she was less than serious. That aside, her messaging was really good. Later on that day, I don't know if you listened when they did unveil because at that point they had not unveiled the details of the plan, and later that day they did. And at the press conference, she had to deliver the caveats to if you're U.S., you can't bid on contracts. There are big caveats. For example, there is a threshold for money-wise, and there is another out for Toronto if there is no other reasonable option other than a U.S. company, then they will contract with them. So they're going to have to manage that really carefully, because people will lean into, you said you weren't going to contract with U.S. companies.
Well, but that's like bitching at somebody because they want to buy, lettuce, and I can only get lettuce right now from the United States. I'm not going to gripe over that, but I get your point. But I think she commanded the ground, the turf, right away, and I think that'll, for the most part, if nothing else, just reflects a growing attitude and a growing momentum around this idea of, we aren't going to put up with it. And from my part, though, Bob, my sense of this is it's not fleeting, where, and I would compare it to how we responded, for example, to the pandemic. And we thought, oh, we better get our manufacturing up to snuff because we don't have PPEs and all that kind of stuff. And that just kind of fell off the desk because the urgency went away. I don't get the sense that this is going to go away at all, that we're already prepared to shift focus, to actually maybe, have some pain. We saw inflation numbers jump there this week. We're ready to be braced for the eventuality of not having the Americans so prominent in our economy or our lives.
It's a fundamental and long-term shift that's underway. I mean, there's no mystery as to why the first thing Mark Carney did when becoming prime minister was go to Europe. Like, what a strong signal does that send? And I think this whole exercise has been an important wake-up call. You look at the things that are being talked about that have been backburnered for years, like interprovincial trade barriers, like finalizing trade agreements. We have one with the UK and one with Europe that are still not fully signed off on. So there's new impetus there, new partnerships, and the notion that, okay, fool us once, U.S., and you did, or Trump did, by just unilaterally abrogating the trade deals, the trade agreements, mutually beneficial, mutually productive trade agreements that we've had in place for years. We're not going to get fooled again. And the mistrust that has resulted from this, that is the new reality, that the U.S. isn't a reliable partner anymore. And could that change? Sure. Will we see American booze back on the shelves at the LCBO? I'm sure we will at some point. But a lot of other more fundamental long-term changes are not going to be switched back.
Yeah, Lindsay, I don't get the sense of hair on fire in terms of the national sentiment at a sort of citizenry level. I just think there's a determination. This is what's going to happen, and we're all going to do it, and away we go.
It's interesting, like hair on fire, no, meaning we're not running in circles and being frenetic. I think it's very focused. I've never seen, even during COVID, I think, this determination to change behavior and a pride in it. I read data where if we shift just 25, well, not just, it's significant, but 25% of what we spend on Americans, 25% of those dollars to local, it increases our GDP automatically by 0.7%, right? Like that's huge. We've got the power to sway our own market in a way that I don't think we've believed in before. And also, I think the cynicism that often comes from what can an individual do, right? Choose an issue. Often we feel powerless. And at the beginning of this, on the radio or in conversations, I heard a lot of that cynicism, but for a hot second. Around like, oh, fine, don't go to the States. Oh, fine, what are you going to prove? We're going to prove a damn lot, right? And it's so cumulative. My sense, though, is it's also deeply entrenched in this notion of our relationship. we keep saying, and it's the right political message, that, this is Trump who's made the decision. However, as a citizen, I have to say, even though I'd advise people to probably continue to tout that and repeat that, as a citizen, it's more than just Trump. He was elected in a democratic process, let's assume. And while immensely distracted by incredible challenges domestically, in the disruption that's happening there, they're doubling down. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the midterms. But this isn't just about me protesting not going to the States right now because of Trump. I'm protesting because there has been a dogged refusal to acknowledge the impact that vote, that election, that leader has had internationally. And until that changes, my behavior as an individual is going to sustain. And that's what I'm hearing more and more from people as well.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, I've made this point when people started booing the national anthem. It's not the Americans. It's not. Well, there are 80 million enablers in that country that put him in office. So if you don't get their attention, you're sure not going to get Trump's attention.
Oh, that's true. That's very true. And you can't fault people for the emotions that they're feeling. And I think to a certain extent, they're still feeling all of that emotion, because this is going to hit more people than we realize it's going to hit. And it's going to be very, very painful for a lot of people. And our downtowns and our main streets were already still suffering significantly from the pandemic, but they were on their way up. But this will really have a huge impact on our downtowns, our cities, even our small communities, their impact. I think we haven't even started to look at what's this going to do regarding costs of all these big transit projects and road projects and highway projects that are underway. It's going to significantly increase the cost of it. Are we prepared for that? And I think we just don't realize how long this is going to take for us to get out of it. And I think it will be the ballot box question for the federal election coming up. It will endure through it. And I think Poilievre still hasn't kind of mind shifted that to who his enemy that he's appointing at. He needs to shift that, or the shocking polls are going to come true, which is just unheard of in how things have changed between the Liberals and the Conservatives because of tariffs, solely because of tariffs. So I think we have to pay attention to it. And I think there are groups. One of the groups that I work with is the Canadian Urban Institute. They are looking at the long-term impacts of this, and they're tracking it. And you can, they're releasing a tracker of sort, and you can track per community right across Canada what the impact is going to be, and it'll change as the impacts increase. They're also tracking the actions that governments at all levels are implementing to help mitigate the impacts of the tariffs. That's really important that we know because it's going to require all hands on deck to be able to mitigate the impacts. And then they're also tracking really innovative solutions, because I'm really impressed by how at the street level, like a restaurant having days where they do a 25% discount on your food costs as a tariff discount, they're calling it. So it's really innovative solutions at the street level, just right at individual level that people are doing. And that's really impressive. But it's important that we learn from each other throughout this so that we can implement them in our local communities as well. So I'm really enjoying the work with the Canadian Urban Institute, because they're really on the ground helping organize this across the country, because it's going to take time. It's going to take a long time to come out of this.
Well, and part of the cost, though, Bob, is that, where the the retailer or the business is actually absorbing the cost of it just to make sure that you walk in the door and take care, do business in their shop. I heard yesterday the conversation has bubbled up again about the staycation tax break, right? I mean, the idea that if you're going to have your vacation in Canada, you should get some kind of credit for that, and that should be recognized. That's low-hanging fruit for any level of government, and that, I think, is probably the next obvious step for somebody like Chow to be able to say, okay, and if you take vacation in Toronto and you're from Ontario, here's what you get. I mean, there are incentives and ways to not only make it pay, but to acknowledge the actual value of the attitudes that we're expressing in the public.
It would be easy for the province to do it because they did it before, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had the staycation tax credit in place, so that's an easy switch for them to flip. And I hope they do, because I think you're right. I think there should be incentivization beyond just the moral suasion that's going on right now. The big test that I see coming on the horizon, it's all easy for us to wave the flag and to say elbows up and to do all of that good stuff. It gets different. It will be different when the prices actually start to go up. Because personally, I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen any tariff-related impacts on the bottom line on my regular consumables. But that day will come. And that's when you separate the wheat from the chaff and you really see how deep is that determination. Are people going to start to bail if they, if once it's actually costing them money? I mean, that's what we're hoping to see on the American side of the equation. Once the price of their gas goes up, that's going to generate some reaction as well. And on the Canadian items that they do buy when tariffs go into effect there. So that's what I'm going to be watching for as the next shoe to drop, is what happens when the price tag actually goes up on things.
I want to get to what's happening federally, and Henry already alluded to the massive swing in the polls and everything else that's gone around with the tariffs. And we noted that Prime Minister Carney went to Europe and visited paid a visit to France and to England, had an audience with King Charles yesterday, and dropped in on the folks in Nunavut and made a fairly significant commitment vis-a-vis defense in the north. But all of that kind of got pushed to one side because of the way he answered his questions around disclosing his assets, and that became, I think, it was almost like he put the rake down in front of him. Watch this! Stepped on the rake and whack right between the eyes, and for the most part gave the Tories and opposition generally a whole lot of fodder that they didn't need. Like, he could have avoided. This is a long clip, but I want to hear in context. I've heard it clipped in several places. This is the entire exchange, and then I want all of your communications, crisis comms brains on this.
We understand that you have now placed your assets in a blind trust, so you don't know what's happening to them going forward, but you knew what they were going into that blind trust. So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the Ethics Commissioner. I'm following them well in advance of any of the requirements, as you know, because I know you know this. You know that these requirements come into effect in months. We're talking days after I became Prime Minister. So I'm complying with the rules of the Ethics Commissioner, going through the processes and all these things that are necessary. And I will remind you, and I'll remind Canadians again, that the Leader of the Opposition cannot find it. And look, you look at the questions this evening, you look at the nature of the discussions. Look at the nature of discussions I had with the President of France, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The Leader of the Opposition would not be capable of having those discussions because the Leader of Opposition refuses to get his security clearance, something that it took me a few weeks to get. And he has been the Leader of the Opposition for 3 years. So I comply with my responsibilities. I comply with the rules well in advance. And the Leader of the Opposition doesn't take his responsibilities. at a time of, well, you should take these responsibilities in any time, but it's particularly remarkable given the stakes in global geopolitics at the moment.
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
Someone spent most of his life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
Okay, Lindsay, I'm thinking that clip is 3 minutes long. It's lengthy, but I think it was necessary to get the full context of the back and forth there. I'm thinking that people are going to be using that from time to time in media training.
Oh my Lord. It's so funny. Like, first of all, thank you. I hadn't seen the video. I've been listening to it endlessly and have had to comment on it, but I haven't seen the video. There's so many lessons here. First of all, he is a corporate leader who has moved to a public sector space. He's used to sitting at the front of the boardroom table. He's used to demanding the agenda, owning the agenda. He's used to being in charge of teams and having the final say. He's now moved to a different podium, also center stage, but where the yous and me's of the world, you called us the great unwashed, we're the boss, right? And to call Rosie Barton and to suggest that she should look within herself is the pinnacle of arrogance, right? And this is the very thing that he needs to dodge. I could care less if he's super wealthy. In fact, I wish he is. I hope he is. And I assume he is because he's been at the head of the boardroom table. He is brilliant. He's successful. I hope that he's been remunerated accordingly, right? I do not want him to be arrogant or above the conversation. And within a week or two that he's just had, which I think has been spot on, perfect, brilliant. Every decision that his team has made so far in terms of where to go, what to say, how to perform, it's hit it out of the park for me. The fact that we're spending time rightly on these 3 minutes says everything you need to know. Constituents are going to be judging him on his ability to meet this moment in time. He's been given the golden goose to be the man of the moment for this moment in our history. And he may be the right person. He's going to lose all of that footing if he is above Canadians. That's what Trudeau was accused of, and that role he fulfilled. He needs to ladder in completely with his intelligence, his relationships, and his ability to put Canada rightly in our leadership spot. So what a brilliant clip and what a brilliant conversation. And it has everything to do with corporate communications.
Bob, they're already selling merch that says, look within yourself.
P.S. It's what Hannibal Lecter told Jodie Foster's character.
Nice.
I'm just saying.
There you go.
It's funny what we remember or cue into. Sorry to interrupt. But
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. That was the banana peel moment. The messaging in his response wasn't bad. this business of, well, the ethics commissioner and the rules, and I've actually complied faster than I'm required to. All of that's good stuff. I think strategically what he was hoping to do was go around that block a couple of times and bore the media with his answer, and they'll let this go and move off onto other things, which might have worked until he got snotty, until he got chippy about it. And then that's just blood in the water for the press gallery. And there's now analysis pieces being written and published about that moment. And it's a colossal misstep, one that a seasoned politician would have known better than to engage in. And now it's an issue that's not going to go away for him. He can't bore his way out of this. He can't hope that they'll move on to other things, because he's chummed the water up too much around this. This is a vulnerability, and it's a dog and a bone kind of thing now. Like the lead question was, you put your assets into a blind trust. What are they? Now I think he's got no choice but to lance that boil and put out a list. You'd think the Liberal advisors would have learned from Bill Morneau. Remember him with his chalet in France and all of that? This was the exact same chase that was underway. What exactly does the guy own? How rich is the guy exactly? We know Mark Carney's a wealthy man. Nobody's going to be surprised by that. And the more he works to try and keep that under wraps, the more he adds oxygen to this issue and keeps it in play and keeps it dogging him. So I think the smartest thing, crisis communication 101, identify where this thing's going to go and then get there as fast as you can. So release a list. Here's everything that he owns that went into the blind trust. Fill your boots.
Well, Anne-Marie, the question came up the next day too, when he was in the Arctic, right? I mean, somebody said, are you possibly in any kind of conflict at any point? And he misunderstood the question because it was in French, and then he had to have it clarified, but still tried to stick handle around it as if, there are strict guidelines. And what this gets at for me is the opportunity for anybody to criticize him on the grounds of, why don't you just answer the fucking question and tell us what's going on here? Because it's not an unusual question. It's an unusual circumstance to have you in the prime minister's chair, unelected, et cetera, and we understand that. Surely you understand that. So maybe you could be forthcoming and just be transparent about it.
Exactly. That I think that he has, as Lindsay said, done brilliantly well for, especially without any political experience. He's done his communication skills have been exactly what I think Canadians are looking for: a steady hand, a reliable. We want him to be brilliant with money. So if he's not brilliant with money, then he has to be rich, because that's what we're counting on him for, to be brilliant with his money. So I'm not sure what they were afraid of, but he looked like a man that was defensive, that he wasn't being transparent. He was evasive, but worse, he was condescending especially to women reporters. That was just reeked of condescension. And it was completely unnecessary. I was really, really hoping for his sake that very quickly he pivoted and apologized for the manner in which he spoke to them, even if he still didn't answer the question, to apologize for that. It was just so uncalled for. But I think exactly what Bob says. They're forced. Their back is against the wall because his issue is not going to go away. I heard it today, and they gave a different message about he'll have to recuse himself if a company he's ever worked for is up for some sort of decision making. So I think they're going to keep having to answer it. So just lance it now and get it over with. I think the worst that will then the Conservatives will have, Poilievre will be able to go on. Oh, look how rich he is. Well, I want him to be rich. If it comes out he's a bankrupt banker, I will be very disappointed in him. So I hope he is rich. But the more he denies and puts up a wall between the answering what his assets were, it makes him look like he's hiding something.
Well, I think
he
there'll be
owes women an apology.
I think there'll be a drinking game, Lindsay, in the debate, and how many times the opposition will turn to Mr. Carney and say, "Look within yourself, Prime Minister."
Look within yourself. Oh, it's just it's so unfortunate. I'm cheering him on in many ways because I think we want, regardless of, again, I'm not partisan in those traditional ways. I want a great leader right now, desperately, whoever that is that steps up to the platform. So be it. So I don't want, and this kind of ties in, if depending on where you want to go, but to Poilievre's approach too right now, like the traditional infighting or party against party that would happen in an election, I have little patience for it right now. So I'm hoping that these kind of repetitive kind of questions that eat up the oxygen of where we can be talking about real policy change or, ideation around moving things forward, building action-oriented language, that's what needs to be front and center. So I hope that this boring, repetitive, same news cycle type of storyline gets quashed. But to Bob and Anne-Marie's point, it's only going to happen. He owns the keys to that particular car now. He's got to figure out a way to change the story.
Yeah, I think the distraction is very much media driven, and that's a bad place, Bob, to be picking a scab right now.
Yep, it absolutely is. And aside from this, I agree with my fellow panelists that he's been pretty spot on in his execution, in his performance, in his messaging, and that's the thing that really struck me in the last since last Friday is this guy looks like the Prime Minister. Right. And that's a fundamental decision point that all of us as voters make when we're considering whoever it is who aspires to the job. Do they look like they can do it? Do they look like they could actually wear that mantle and do that role? And very quickly, immediately, Mark Carney looks like the Prime Minister of Canada. He looks very credible. He looks like he belongs in the role. And I think this has got to be terrifying for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. And I think it explains a lot about the reversal we're seeing in the polls.
Well, Anne-Marie, I think it was an Angus Reid poll out yesterday, was like pushing 50% for the Liberals all of a sudden. Yeah. Now, the polls are all over the place, and there's some that are sort of lagging in terms of the apparent support for the Liberals given the tariff situation. But we talk a lot about momentum, and when we're going into campaigns, and Doug had it and he maintained it. Right now, boy, if you're heading into Game 7, I want Carney's momentum.
Yeah, exactly. Geez, can you imagine it's majority territory. That is 2 months ago we were talking about how the Liberals were pretty much done. And they were lucky if they could even have party status. It was just incredible. And a lot of that is Trudeau. You have to credit him for seizing that moment with Trump. And it's carried on to with, I think, the Liberals' choice and our Prime Minister. It's exactly like Bob says. He's looking and acting like a Prime Minister. However, inexperienced in his talking to media, I think their approach to going who he met with first was brilliant. Trump has gone a little quiet on that, made very weird comments about Poilievre yesterday. That was interesting to listen to, about how he doesn't like him because he's criticized him or something. And said he'd rather deal with the Liberals. It was just a very odd conversation that Trump had yesterday. But anyway, and I think he also yesterday said that he'd fixed everything with the between the Russians and the Ukraine, and then overnight the Russians bombed a hospital in Ukraine. So you can't believe a word that comes out of his mouth, but you have to react to it nonetheless. It's very difficult. I don't know how people manage it, but and Carney has been really, really good. This is a big misstep, and I hope his communication advisors are huddling on how to fix this. Because but sometimes I just wonder, are they huddling at all? Or do their leaders not listen to them? Because they have to see this is going to carry on and on and on unless they seize this moment to get back the momentum that they had. It doesn't have to kill that momentum, but they need to fix it.
Well, you guys have pointed out that Mark Carney generally behaving and looking like a prime minister, and Justin Trudeau looking like one of us the other day, taking a selfie in Canadian Tire. So we bring it right back to elbows up by Canadian. All right, that'll do it for us for this week on Now and Next. It's the CA.S.T. Comms and Strategies team with Anne-Marie Aikins, Lindsay Broadhead, Bob Reid. I'm Dave Trafford. Thanks for being here. And we will be rebooting On the Ledge this week, so we'll have that crew back in studio. We're going to record tomorrow, so by the end of the week, you'll have it in your feed, and all good. So if you've got a thought on it, by all means, make sure you leave us a comment. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and you'll get both shows in there, Now and Next, and On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. Enjoy the week, and let us know if you enjoyed the show. See ya.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and Next is Story Studio Network's flagship podcast, produced by our chief executive producer, Dave Trafford, and supported by our entire SSN team, including our senior producers, Becky Coles and Jen Hudson, our technical producer and audio editor, Mike Trutler. Jamie Nickerson is our production manager, and our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Also, I'm Erin Trafford, Queen of the Universe.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.